Good afternoon.
Hi there.
Hello.
Just the two of us so far.
So far,
Okay. I know Joe will be on for sure because I just talked with him.
okay, great. And actually, I modified today a little bit. I think we'll finish a bit early. Well, of course, depending on what conversation looks like. So we may finish a bit early today.
Okay. I'm going to probably darken my screen a little bit because I'm eating a sandwich. I don't want to sit and eat in front of everybody. So I will be watching and listening, but I'll be in and out. I'll be here, but
Sure, not a problem. Yeah. The meeting we had this morning, I did need to mute everyone a few times. When you get that many people on, inevitably someone forgets that they're not on mute, and
yeah.
you get the crunch crunch or just the rustling of papers or whatever it may be.
Yep. Yeah, that's for sure. I go through that every week with my sales team. So howdy, Scott.
Wow, a jacket and a t-shirt. Look at you go today. Mickey Mouse. I like it.
Yeah.
Nice.
It's Formal Friday.
Formal Friday.
All right.
Can't go wrong with Mickey.
That's true.
No,
That's true.
sure can't. That House of Mouse does pretty well.
Yep.
That was actually one of the things we've been looking forward to in our family is our bank offers for university students the option of getting a university or then just university students and then regular adult checking and savings accounts offers debit cards, Disney debit cards.
Ah.
And my young son that's a high school senior, who they told him he had to have his acceptance letter to be able to switch to that Disney debit card, and he's got his acceptance letter now, so he's looking forward to getting the upgraded card.
Cool. That's good. May as well enjoy the card. You might not get to enjoy the park for a long time.
Right. Well, and supposedly they said that, Chase has a kiosk there that if you go there and show them your card, they give you a little something. I don't know. It's probably a pen or something. Who knows? But
Yeah.
haven't been to try it out.
Cool.
It's one square of toilet paper.
Yeah.
Probably, right? Okay, well, we're right at 1 o'clock, but we'll give it a minute since we do had Joe.
Yeah, I know he's coming on, but there they are. As we speak. There's Bree.
Can you guys hear me?
Yes. Can you hear us?
Can anyone hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. Can you hear us?
Okay, I can't hear you guys. Let me try fixing some things. Okay. How about now?
We can hear
We
you.
still hear you.
Excellent. I can hear you guys now. That's the important part for me.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Hey, I wanted to introduce you to Maggie Vale. Let me see if I can do that. There we go. Yep, I'm on.
There she is in the background.
So Maggie's going to be joining us on Monday, and I've asked her to participate in these. Shauna will probably need to get her the last 2 days of videos if you have them available.
Yes, I have. They're all available. I'll go ahead and send those off. Just send me an email, and I'll get that and send you invitations to the last 3 sessions after today. We've got 3 left, and reminder again, those are Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday of next week.
At 1 o'clock, right?
Yes.
Okay. I'm going to just send you her personal email. For now, we don't have yet one set up.
Okay.
So.
Well, go ahead and send it on over, and I'll send you the links for the 2 previous ones. Obviously, you're here today, and then send you the invitations for the end, as well as the initial documentation that I sent off. And then also for just Maggie, for your benefit, I've mentioned to these folks already at the end of all of the session, just because I may be tweaking the slide deck just a smidge here and there. At the end of the last day, I will send out the entire slide deck to you all. Just save it to y'all for y'all as a PDF and send that out.
Very good.
Thank you.
All right, well, let's go ahead and jump on in. Welcome, welcome. Thank you for joining. And we may finish a little earlier today. And this slide is a little bit of a spoiler in that one question I tend to ask folks a lot is, tell people a lot rather, is that you're already using Lean Six Sigma. And that picture on the right is the reason why. I mean, we all have a version of the silverware drawer, right? The thing where everything goes in its place. That's Lean Six Sigma. It comes from Lean. And again, reminding y'all that Lean Six Sigma takes from Lean, it takes from Six Sigma, combines everything together, right? So it's definitely a tool that we use, and that organizational piece is part of that. All right, so let's head on to the next. Then I want to talk briefly about what Lean Six Sigma can do for you. And of course, I'm not going to read the entire slide. There's a lot there, but I want to be aware of this. And again, you'll get these slides afterwards. I do want to call out, if I may, though, that second bullet point, which is a little near and dear to my heart. Maggie, for your benefit, I'm in charge of risk and safety for SMART. And so of course I like to focus on the risk and safety piece of this. Certainly risk, and it does inherently improve risk, but a lot of folks feel like it's slash and burn, have a ends justify the means type of thing. Of course, no, it's not at the detriment of safety or, quite frankly, product quality, because that's truthfully the point of it. Is we're improving processes, we're reducing costs, we're improving quality, and thereby inherently reducing risk and increasing safety. So again, this slide should be a relative no-brainer, but I included it in there because every blue moon someone will bring something up or it'll come up, and so I like to point that out. Okay, I'd like to tell the story, and a few of you may have heard me tell this story before. This is a real business. They're in Indiana. I believe they're in Indianapolis. Don't quote me on that. I may not be correct, but Crossroads Kombucha is a real business, and of course, kombucha is kind of the hot beverage these days, especially. But this was a very small mom and pop store, and this organization, this company, really truly took it to heart. The owners took it to heart. They were at a crossroads, no pun intended, where they were getting ready to move into new building. They'd had a lot of issues. They wanted to expand their business, but production was limited. They needed certainly to be able to expand, but obviously sales can only do so much if they can only keep up with a very small amount. And I believe to start with, they were, and it's been a little bit since I've read the case study on this, around 10 to 12 clients. So very, very small mom and pop, very much of local entity, and they really wanted to expand. Well, the owners heard about Lean Six Sigma and Six Sigma specifically, and then expanded into Lean Six Sigma. And they thought, well, we're already moving into this new facility. Let's not duplicate any issues we may have. This is a perfect opportunity to study this, learn this, and apply it to our new facility and kind of rebrand themselves and see what they can do. Well, quite frankly, I'll give you the abbreviated version is they were incredibly successful. They redesigned their equipment. They didn't purchase any new equipment, just in the course of studying the principles, they redesigned the equipment so they didn't have to increase FTEs. They were able to actually just be much more efficient. So they increased their efficiencies by a really significant percent. Today, Crossroads Kombucha is not a local mom and pop manufacturer anymore. They're regional. They're regional to that entire area around Indiana. And I believe now the case study I read initially said they're in 3 states. I kind of checked up on them it's been about 3 or 4 months ago. They're now in 5 or 6. So they're really expanding. They're moving out. They're becoming, they've moved into the big shakers. So of course, being able to do this helped them, certainly in their manufacturing side, that's a no-brainer, but it helped them with their sales because they applied it across the board. It helped them with how they handled their HR. I mean, they literally just took it. They kind of went with the GE model, which if you'll recall, GE really just infused Six Sigma in everything they do. They really took that model to heart. And when they moved, they brought all of that in and applied it everywhere. They really held everyone accountable. All the managers, all the directors that they had held everybody accountable to, you're going to improve your area. What can we do? What can we do to make better? And again, their growth was I can't give the exact number, but something like 276-ish% in 6 months. I mean, just phenomenal growth. And that doesn't happen very often, although I know very few business owners or salespeople who would turn that kind of growth down. All right. I'm going to hop into really briefly misconceptions and challenges with Lean Six Sigma. First and foremost, a lot of folks just say, well, it's for manufacturing, because Six Sigma certainly initiated in a manufacturing setting, but it's not just that. And certainly a lot of examples fall easily into that. But myself personally, I've worked certainly in government industries as well as banking, finance. I've seen realtors use it. I've not personally worked in that arena, but I've seen really large realty companies use it, as well as kind of medium to small ones as well use it. So it's used all over, and it can be used in every single industry. And again, back to that slide with the silverware. I mean, you're using a version of it in your home already. I mean, it can be used personally. I actually worked, a former colleague took Lean to heart, and you may have seen certainly in manufacturing settings, or even just visiting your mechanic, the pegboard, that, infamous pegboard. It seems like every mechanic's got one where every tool's in its place. It's got a hook. Some of them even go to the point where they label them. So, you can, and the point of that, of course, is you can look at it, you can look at something and you can see if something's missing, and you can see where something goes. Like if you have a team of people sharing, you can see where something goes, it gets put away, it stands out. You can do that with your processes as well. Think about how you can apply that to the processes that you all use. What can you implement to label things, organize things so that it's very apparent when you're missing something? That, quite frankly, just by creating those types of systems, it helps you be more efficient. Or it automatically, first of all, it pushes you to be more efficient, and it just increases your efficiencies. I actually, just a quick story, I worked with a gal that she took the Lean tagging everything and labeling everything to heart. She was single and entertained a lot and had a lot of different friends in and out of her home. And it bothered her having people coming into her kitchen and opening cupboards and looking through cupboards in her kitchen. I don't know, maybe she has special glasses or something, but so she labeled all of her all the drawers and cupboards in her kitchen, just got a little label maker and just labeled everything: glasses, plates, silverware, things like that. And she told me that, which, quite frankly, I'm a big proponent of Lean. I think that is a very extreme example. I don't necessarily think that everyone needs to start labeling everything at their desk and things like that. But again, when you're in situations where their groups are sharing tools, groups are sharing things, having that labeling system helps. And again, as you walk through clients, that's a great call out, easy call out, quite frankly. Are they doing it? It's a great suggestion. It's an easy thing to point out. All right, then another misconception is that you've got to be a stats genius to be able to do this. And certainly the Six Sigma side of this is leans very heavily into statistics. And of course, I showed you that great formula that looks like it's Greek or who knows what language. You don't, because quite frankly, even if you want to go into the numbers and do all of those kinds of things, my buddy Google has all of those tools available for you, so you can plug numbers in. Like I mentioned before, a Sigma calculator. You can throw your numbers in and it figures you for you. You don't have to get out your abacus to figure something like that out.
But I will
Also,
get to learn the stats, right? Because I do enjoy myself a good, challenge with that, right?
we're not going to go very heavily into stats. We're definitely going to go into some of the numbers. And it's funny you mentioned that, Joe, because one of the previous attendees of this class, gosh, I want to say 2 or 3 sessions ago, was a client. He was in the IT department at the client at the time, Snugs. And when I went to check, he set an appointment for me to check in with him on his appointment. He'd done a full-on regression analysis for his project, which I'll be honest, brought a little bit of a tear to my eye because I don't see those very often. But just to be able to, quite frankly, he did that because he went the extra step. Regression analysis is a tool for all of this that some people use, a lot don't. Quite frankly, most don't. He chose to use it because it was a very easy tool for him to prove his point and to show the higher ups why it's important for them to invest his time in finishing his project. Because quite frankly, they were in the process of saying, well, production's getting tight, we need you elsewhere, let's pull you from this. And he ran that regression analysis. Again, being an IT guy, it was easy for him to whip something like that out, to be able to go through and show you, let me show you already what the numbers are showing and how much I'm going to save you. And by allowing me to spend about 10 hours a week on this of my time, I can still continue to get this done. It's not going to monopolize my time, and certainly have time to get other things done. But please don't cut me off completely. Let me finish, because let me show you what I'm going to save. And they did allow, not only did they give him the 10%, they actually said, well, geez, if you're going to do that, do 20% and finish faster. So things like that can definitely come to be to your benefit. And again, I can go through that. I don't go through this heavily, Joe, in this session, just because it's been my experience when I really start getting into the numbers and regression analysis, and let's talk about this and that and other, people's eyes tend to glaze over a little bit. So if you want to get into that, we can definitely get into it. Then, of course, do you need stakeholder support? And that's just kind of a no-brainer, right? Yeah, absolutely do. But a big thing in there is understanding who your stakeholders are, because almost every project, and certainly every process, have multiple stakeholders, right? Then, of course, you need to have good measurement systems in place. Make sure what you're measuring, it has value and it truly gives you numbers. Don't measure for measure's sake, but have it be true value. I worked with a team previously, in a previous professional life, that was being judged. This was a team that was called Card Services. They're basically like a customer service type of team, but they were being judged on how many times a credit card was being swiped at a point of sale. This is when I used to work for JCPenney's shared service center in downtown Salt Lake City. So it was about 400 or 500 people there, all of their different back office accounting groups, things like that, their safety, risk, all of that was in that area. I was working with that particular team, and when I sat and talked with them, that team was being measured on how often, and their KPIs, and that's how raises, bonuses, all of those things were being judged on how often someone in a different JCPenney store was swiping a card. That team has absolutely nothing to do with, they have no influence how often people walk through a door and swipe a card. That team was actually there. Their role was to take care of any issues, if any issues happen, like, a problem with the point of sale machine or whatever that may be. When their manager told me that that's what their KPIs, what they're being measured on, and what he was going to work on his project for, I'll be honest, I got the confused puppy dog look, and I said, why are you measuring it? First of all, why are you measuring something you have and working on a project for something you have no control over, you can't change. You're not going to change unless, of course, you lock your doors, right? You're not going to change the number of people swiping their cards. And obviously, you want more people to swipe them, not less. And why would you measure your team and on something they don't influence? Certainly it's good to know the number of times a card is swiped, perhaps for other purposes, higher level, but for that level, it's not really an appropriate measurement. That's one that just jumps out at me quickly because, and quite frankly, I think I've seen a lot of people tell me, another example is certainly in my role today, I have people tell me, well, I've placed X number of employees. And in my role, my next question is, that's fantastic. How many incidents have we had for that number of employees? If you tell me I've placed 100 employees and we've had 0 incidents, I'm thrilled. If you tell me I've placed 100 employees and we've had 25, I'm not so impressed. So that's where it's this is an opportunity to certainly make sure you've got good measurement systems in place and make sure your numbers mean something. I think we're all probably familiar, certainly for those of you who are traveling a lot, that good old USA Today. I used to joke about that newspaper in particular because it had some really pretty graphs. Really pretty graphs. They were famous for that for a long time, right? All kinds of colors, all this stuff. I mean, you can make your numbers tell any story you want, but again, my recommendation is make sure those numbers are meaningful because ultimately they're going to back you up and quite frankly, they're also going to reinforce what you've done, give you that attaboy, so to speak. All right. Next one, should I avoid excessive analysis? Absolutely. And I'll be honest, I am very guilty of this because I know a couple other people who tend to like to dig down into not just numbers, but analysis. And if one graph is good, then 3 is better. And let me stop and spend some time tweaking this. And even just a plain old Excel spreadsheet, I've seen people spend 40 minutes just formatting. And that's lovely. They've gone into the analysis and done this deep dive rabbit hole of that and then spent all this time formatting. I mean, make it count, make it nice. Certainly you want it to be presentable, but again, use your time wisely. And then I'd like to talk briefly about, and I threw this quote in here because I really like this quote this is from the Project Management Institute about a stakeholder is the individual, group, or organization who may be affected by or perceive, which is the word that I really like in this, perceive to be affected by a decision, activity, or outcome of a project. And any suggestions on why they would put perceive in there, why that would be important?
Oh, for sure. I mean, any piece of the business that winds up being affected, there's so many pieces that if I feel like my job is changing in any way, shape, or form, and I haven't been consulted, I haven't been informed, I haven't participated in any way, shape, or form, I feel as though my world is changing without any control or any buy-in from me. And it actually upsets both morale and productivity as well.
You just hit that right on the head, Joe, because I have been in positions, and I'm sure you all have as well, where if change happens and change is frightening for a lot of folks, even when change ultimately, like Lean Six Sigma, it brings better outcomes, higher productivity, all of these things, increased efficiency. It also shakes up the status quo and scares people sometimes. So it's about being able to help people understand them, talk them down off that proverbial edge. I've worked with more than one person who's like, oh, this is it. I'm going to get laid off. They're doing all these changes. I may as well just quit. I had one lady who was probably about 4 or 5 years from retirement. She's like, I'm just going to retire early. I can't. Yeah, I understand these changes are going to be better, but I don't think I'm going to be able to do this. I think it's going to be beyond my skill set. She was intimidated, and she was ready to walk out the door. And this was an incredibly valuable person. And in that case, I actually showed her some screenshots of some of the upcoming changes, talked her down off that. She calmed down a little bit and said, oh, well, looks a lot more familiar than I realized. Certainly it's a little different, but it's tweaked a little different. But the content there is very familiar. So, oh, okay, all right. So you're exactly right. It's perception too. Part of that also is there will be people who think, again, that they perceive to be affected by a project or something. Have that conversation. Are they really being affected by it? Maybe they're not. And so that can clear up that misconception. Or in some cases, you may think they're not, but in conversation, you'll find out, oh gosh, yeah, they really will be. So I do need to loop them in. So again, it's just that that perceived part is really important for me, because, and I'm speaking to the choir here with the sales team, but being able to negotiate the emotional intelligence of a situation is really vital. And that's a big piece of all of this. And that perceived word is just that. And I'll be honest, more than one time I have sat with someone who's worked through a project, and I'll be honest, even that IT guy that I just mentioned, I've had people say to me, I can do the numbers. I can say, yeah, we should do this. I should do this. I struggle with being able to sit and tell people, work with people and tell them, this is why we're doing it, what we're doing, and just the negotiating and dealing with, again, that emotional intelligence of all of that. So, you know, it's a big part of this. And again, these concepts are nothing exclusive to Lean Six Sigma, of course. These are basic business concepts. All right. So I want to ask, because, and again, throw this up here, some of this is applicable to you all, some of it may not be. I'd like to ask for any particular processes or projects you may anticipate. Who are your stakeholders? Or who do you anticipate your stakeholders to be? Bueller?
Definitely our outsourced labor employees, and the partnership we have with our clients, for sure. I'll just throw those two out if anybody else has any.
I love the term stakeholders, because literally before I came, my kids wanted to put up a tent in our backyard. And I had each one of my kids holding a stake. And we put one in the ground in the pieces of each one of the edges. And I just kind of love that, because without those stakes, this particular tent you can't put it up, because we have one of the scout tents.
Right.
You cannot create this tent without stakes inside the ground, and those key stakeholders is what allows this tent to be erected. So kind of along those exact same lines, anybody that has a piece or decision maker could be a stakeholder. Past that, just like Carrie was saying, our clients are our stakeholders. They're the ones that keep our lights on, right? They're the individuals that we need to make sure we produce for. We have many stakeholders, though, as well inside of our lives that can kind of keep going beyond that. Stakeholders internally, anyone that we need to be part of our decisions, our activity, and more or less sign off on those activities. Those are our stakeholders.
Right. And, government's there, and I've had some people go, well, we don't have anything to do with the government. I go, oh, we do. Oh, we do, because we have regulations and regulatory things that we have to adhere by. And so I have more than once, I have asked a question, and I'm a firm believer that, and still that, fingers crossed, no one's roughed me up yet for asking a question of, hey, why aren't we doing something differently? Why can't we instead of doing this, why can't we do that? And sometimes the answer is no, we can't, because of government regulation.
Mm-hmm.
And so again, that's why, are you going to consult the government as far as I'm going to change my process, blah, blah, blah. You may touch in and just check and verify, regulations that you're not, if it's anything of that nature. But for the most part, no, we don't really check in, obviously, with the government. But that's really is what that's about, is that regulatory body, because obviously we're not doing business specifically with the government.
We are paying them taxes too, though.
Exactly. Well, and again, more than once, and it used to, like I've mentioned before, again, when I was with Federal Occupational Health, which is a division of Health and Human Services. And as many times as I would gnash my teeth at having to deal with government regulation, I discovered pretty quickly that being inside the government is about 10 times worse, because they're so siloed in between. And even there, a lot of times you just can't do things just because of different governmental entities don't talk to each other, so to speak, or not allowed to talk to each other, because, and I'm like, well, can't we change that? And and I've asked that question more than once during my time there, and I was told the only one who can change that is Congress. I'm like, well, all right. So in other words, figure something else out. Which is, what you end up doing is, something, we deal certainly with labor laws, we deal with OSHA, we deal with a lot of other regulatory things. So those are things to keep in mind as well as we make things change, especially like we've got Maria working on something that's HR related. So of course she'll be thinking about those types of things as well, when we've got people doing that. Sometimes a lot of projects don't really touch into that realm, but I do like this particular graphic because it brings it up, because a lot of folks forget, oh yeah, that's a piece of it. All right, this is the fun part. DMAIC is near and dear to my heart. It's that define, measure, analyze, improve, control. And control, I harp on a lot. Y'all get tired of hearing me harp on control. But that's the main principles of Lean Six Sigma. And again, if you'll recall, when I talked about belt projects and certifying, yellow belt, you're doing one tool per DMAIC thing. So one for define, one for measure, one analyze, one improve, one control, one tool for each. And again, I'll help you with all of that. And green belt level would be 3 tools per DMAIC. And this is where it gets fun. And again, these next few slides are pretty busy. Again, I'm not going to read them all, but I am just going to speak to them a bit. Defining really is about defining what you're doing, and talking about, like, if you recall that project charter that we talked about previously. So that's a great way to start that, because that's really high level. What am I doing? What's my business statement? What's problem am I solving? Who is it going to affect? My team, who's my team members, all of those things. What's the scope? All of those things. That's really a good way to just high level define what you're doing. And along those lines, I'll ask, have any of you decided that you're going to work on, whether you're going to formally certify or just work on a project more informally? How do you define what you're going to do?
I want to formally certify.
Awesome. So, and have you decided what project you're going to work on, Scott?
Yeah, Jeff and I are kind of working on the same project, so I think that's going to make it easier for both of us.
Awesome. And so defining that, how is that going to look for you, and defining that in your world? That's, and again, you don't have to answer me right away, but just get those wheels spinning of, again, what am I trying to change? Who are my stakeholders? Who are the team members? All of those things. You're trying to define, what am I trying to change? Even just high level. And again, I've told people, if you want to go into something really formal, I've seen people use all kinds of different tools to do this, not specific to Lean Six Sigma, but really more project management tools. Obviously there's Jira, there's Asana, there's, of course, old school project, MS Project. But even I've told people, even if you're just a Post-it note kind of person, I used to work with a gal who, she wrote all of her to-dos on Post-it notes. And so her desk would just be this sea of Post-it notes, which, I'll be honest, on my end made me a little bit nervous, because I thought, well, what if you lose something? She'd be picking up things and moving things around. And I'm like, do you ever lose one? She goes, oh, every once in a while, but I figure it out, which personally, the control freak that I am gave me a little bit of heart palpitation, but it worked for her, right? So ultimately, at the end of the day, you do what works for you. All right, jumping into the next one is measuring. Again, talking about measuring. You need to start with a baseline. Where are you today with whatever you're working on, project-wise, process-wise? What is that process today? Because of course, you've got to have that baseline. You need to know where you are today. So when you make those improvements, you can speak to the improvements. Because it's great to say, well, we're at 90% today. Well, great. Well, where did you come from? If you came from 85, that's lovely. You improved, but it's not as dramatic if you came from 25%. So you want to be able to have whatever you're measuring, have that baseline and again, be able to speak to that, because you're going to measure twice, of course. You may measure more, but at least twice. You're going to measure that baseline, where you came from and where did you end, and to be able to show that improvement. And again, I'll talk about it some more as well, but when it comes down to, and I've talked about it already, but when it comes down to capturing savings on, or in some cases top line dollars for any type of project, I'm happy to work with y'all as well, because I'm really good about eking out every possible penny. All right, then after you've done your measurement, of course, then you start to analyze, and this is probably not a surprise to any of that I'm kind of a detail person. I like picking things apart. I was told when I did my initial certification with all of this that this is part of my new role. This is what you will be doing. I found pretty quickly it was very conducive to the personality I already have of, I enjoy picking things apart. And quite frankly, I like making things better. So being able to do that. So getting in and analyzing, understanding what you're doing, understanding, do you need to break it up into phases? Is it something you can do in one fell swoop? Is it something that's that can be duplicated elsewhere? A lot of times, you know, it may be something we can duplicate elsewhere. And anytime anyone finishes a project, that's one question I always ask is, can this project be applied elsewhere in the organization? Even if it's a sales project, someone in sales is working on something and someone in HR or someone in recruiting or whatever, even if it's not the exact project, can you take that kernel of an idea and apply it elsewhere? Quite frankly, anytime you can do that and just expand out that kind of stuff, and I'll be honest, this whole process improvement thing, when you get into it and you really start working through it, it's really like a bag of chips. I mean, it's so contagious. You just want to keep going. And I'm not saying even not necessarily formally, but just, geez, I did something here and I could do something here. It's empowering, quite frankly. All right, the next, of course, is after you've done your analysis, you're improving. And once you do that, that improvement, that's when you're consulting again with stakeholders. You're working on making sure that your improvements you're not fixing something here, so to speak, and breaking something over there. So of course, that's why involving stakeholders to really make sure that you've captured everything, because there's very few of us that have that insight into every single piece. I did, and I don't recall if it was with you all or with the previous group. I mentioned that I went out to with North Carolina to visit with a warehouse folks, and they were shocked when I was asking questions, saying, hey, if we do this, this, and this, how is that going to affect you? They dealt with other people making improvements, but they never had anyone ask them questions. They were always just told, these are the changes we've made. This is what you'll comply with. Which ultimately ended up either in resistance, just because someone on high said, you'll do this. And it's like, well, geez, who are you to tell me my business, even though technically I report to you, kind of thing. You know, you get resistance, right? As well as, quite frankly, someone from different levels. Having that bird's eye level, sometimes you don't see the minutia, and then vice versa. So it's good to get everybody involved with that. Then lastly, and again, I'll harp on this one a little bit later next week, control. Having controls in place as you wrap up a project is incredibly vital, because quite frankly, you don't want to spend all that time and then ultimately wasting it because there aren't controls in place to make sure that it's carried through. And that could be something as simple as an SOP. Hey, we've designed something new. Here's the SOP. Here's how to work through a process. Or it could be something as simple as a very basic audit. It doesn't have to be complicated. Again, and it's a matter of doing what makes sense for you and the cadence that makes sense for you. Maybe something you check in quarterly, maybe something you only check in once a year, or if it's something very intricate, maybe you check in monthly. So it just depends on the level that you need. And again, you all dictate the levels that make the most sense for you on all of this. Okay, and on the line, I will put in that and I did mention before that first project that I certified with, which again was great. But again, I started with the question of why. Why should I do this? And, or why are you so busy? And again, just why someone couldn't help me. Why? And again, several months later, it ended up being a very large project. I mean, overall, $3 million in savings, $2.5 million for the company I was working for, $500,000 for that very large. It was a very large enterprise client. So this was a multi-million-dollar client, and so. And this was an inventory project. And quite frankly, I'm not an inventory manager. I have never been an inventory manager. But I can go in and talk about, I can ask basic questions, and sometimes having that set of fresh eyes is really helpful. So that's really what it's about. So again, ask lots of questions, dive in deep, and that's really what it's about. So that being said, I'm actually going to stop here just because I do have I got plenty more to go on, but I'm just thinking what I've got is really going to be pretty time. I don't want to dive into it and then have to stop just looking because we're not too far from time. So I'd rather finish a little early than cut off in an awkward part and then start again on Wednesday.
Well, this piece here, Shauna, is kind of the structure of what we'll do in the project.
Yes, and we'll talk about that. And as we Thursday and Friday of next week specifically, I'll talk about very specific tangible steps. Like this is what we're going to do. We're going to talk about a tool called an A3, which is basically your individual dashboard and how you fill it and how you apply all these different DMAIC steps to it. But DMAIC really is the heart and soul of this, of understanding that, again, that define, measure, analyze, improve, control piece of it, because ultimately those are the steps of continuous improvement.
Okay.
And along those lines, I did send out that attachment I sent with the schedule. There's like a little addendum there with some videos on there. Again, those videos are really short. Please do watch them, and because some of them go into this, and some of them are just a couple cute little videos. They're all, again, none of them more than 2-3 minutes long. Won't take too much time, but do go through and watch those. They all are connected to all of this and kind of just reinforce this.
Good.
Sweet. Any questions, comments?
No, I love the acronyms. Very clear on what each step needs to include in order to be able to have, a well thought out methodology on improving whatever process you're looking at. I like it.
Right. Awesome. Okay. Well, at that, if there's no other questions, my gosh, we'll finish actually a fair 20 minutes or so early, but thank you all. And I'll go ahead and send out that email here shortly. And I'll see you all on Wednesday. Well, leadership for some of you on Monday, and then well, pretty much all of you, right? And then Wednesday for the class.
Great. Thanks, Shauna.
Hey, thank you all.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
See you.